Hey, everyone. It's a huge episode today. And, you know, recruitment really is a slippery slope sometimes. And I think I come before you today having learned all of the lessons, completely can relate to. And I think that you're never immune from making hiring mistakes. I want to put that out there. I don't think recruitment skill set and being able to select talent is you get the skill and it's the end. You're always vulnerable to making mistakes because humans are complicated, and our ability to read the play and understand who we've got in front of us and then make decisions that potentially are going to play out in our favor later on down the track are always subject to mistakes being made, because we don't ever have a crystal ball in front of us. We don't know 100% of the time how things are going to pan out. Obviously, people present themselves at face value, and you need to make decisions in that moment based on the information that you have available to you. However, there are strategies that you can employ. There are skills that you can refine to make it much less likely that you're going to have somebody in your business that shouldn't be in your business, and also that you're going to select somebody that is completely aligned, great fit, perform at a high level, obviously once they've received the training and development that they require to perform at a high level, and that you, as you go along, start to make less mistakes when it comes to recruitment. So a little bit about my experience. So as you know or you don't know, my background is that I'm a psychologist and I opened a skin clinic. So coming into this industry, I had absolutely no clue of the caliber, what a high-performing skin therapist looked like, what sort of personality traits they would exhibit, what I needed to be looking for in terms of things that would deem them to be someone worthwhile of hiring. Now, I had had some hiring experience in the government departments. I had obviously been responsible for running clinical units in the prison system. I was used to hiring psychologists, right? But I was definitely, and I suppose that probably fed into me having some skill set around being able to, and being a psychologist too, being able to maybe see through some of the facade that people put up when they're appraising whether someone might be a good fit to work for their business or not. But I was still, how can you put it? I still felt a bit lost. I think it was just this experience of, this is not my industry. I'm not sure about these things. Who am I to know exactly what a well-qualified person looks like? So basically, I did what most business owners in the hair, beauty and skin industry do now. And I just looked at resumes and I looked at qualifications. I looked at level of experience as the indicator of whether someone was going to be a good fit for my business or not. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, that's kind of what you do, don't you? And in fact, what I came to learn was that was the biggest mistake, was that purely I was taking people's level of experience, and then from that, I was making assumptions about what they should and shouldn't be able to do in my business. What I came to realize very quickly is that sometimes what is written, claimed, because I was hiring on level of experience, and I felt like I had to, because I was a startup skin clinic. I knew nothing about the treatments and the services to a certain degree. I also did all of the training myself, in terms of I would go along to the modality training. I would do, I would upskill myself in terms of the theory and things like that. So I wasn't completely misinformed, right? But I did take the view that I needed to open up a clinic with people that had advanced levels of experience, and my appraisal of the resumes was looking for people that had, a few years, of practice that was evident in their work history. Anyway, so I go and hire people that are qualified, right? So people that had done at least diplomas, thermal therapy degrees. And first and foremost, the first assumption that I made was, well, they've got a qualification, so they must be able to do the job. And I can feel you laughing along with me and thinking, oh, she's in for a rude shock, because it's not always the case that a formal qualification means that people can do things. But I come to learn that along the way. So the formal qualification and the years of experience, tick, tick, come into my business and do the job. Now, what actually ended up happening was, in the background, I'm doing my own research around client care, client-centered service delivery. Obviously, I'd come from an allied health model. Okay, so in allied health, we were very much about the treatment planning, the prescription, the evidence base around getting people outcomes and results. So I knew that philosophy and that underpinning that I came from in terms of allied health was still going to play a role in the skin treatment side of things, because it made sense to me. So when I started asking questions of the qualified professionals that I had hired around, okay, so what does the treatment plan look like? What do the home, we've obviously got all of this amazing cosmeceutical grade home care. What does this look like to you when you're seeing these clients come in with these various skin concerns? And I was completely shocked at the responses. I had varying responses in terms of looks of sometimes bewilderment, like not really understanding what I was asking for. And this was coming from a place of, well, they've booked in for a micro, so I'm doing a micro, aren't I? Like, there was no degree of, even though part of the protocols was that a skin analysis would take place, that seemed to me like it was being done, but it wasn't even being utilized to inform the pathways. It was kind of like, we did the skin analysis, tick it off. Next, we do the microderm. We do the microderm. I had clients walking out without home care, and I had clients walking out without any sort of plan. Now, when I brought this to the team, and I said, guys, like, I feel like we're missing something here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be best practice to make sure that, these clients are receiving treatment plans and then they're getting a proper home care prescription, and, this would be the standard of care? And I was met with, that's really pushy. People just want to come in and have a beautiful service. They don't want to be bothered with us pushing products and where to, pushing them to come in for another appointment. And I'm thinking, this can't be right. It can't be right. Like, in my mind, people who want skin treatment are coming to you to get a problem resolved, in the vein of you informing them of what they need to do. I don't feel like that's pushing anybody. That's actually just providing professionally led information that they've come to you for, right? So here I am spinning around in my seat thinking, I'm not getting this. Like, something's not right here. And I wasn't getting like a lot of clear information from the industry either. Like, there was good information around how do you do a skin analysis and theories of skin and blah, blah, blah. And, there wasn't a lot around in terms of treatment planning, the product companies did a fair job at educating around products and ingredients, but I don't think they were really strong on the prescription side of things, you know, at the time. Possibly that, I think they've sort of improved on that since. But I was just completely confused. And what actually happened was, over a period of time, I started to sort of, my sense of confidence in understanding what this industry was about was starting to be, how could I put this? I was kind of being gaslit, if I'm to be honest, by the team, because they were qualified and experienced professionals, right? According to the resumes. So I had them informing me of the way and what clients really wanted. And then I had this clinical level of understanding around results and client care that was completely bumping up against my experience of the talent that I was encountering with the people that I'd hired. Anyway, eventually I come to my senses and I thought, nah, this completely feels not aligned. I've made some big mistakes here. Potentially, I don't feel like I've got the right people. What am I going to do? I just felt really overwhelmed, and I'd made some mistakes. But then these 3 or 4 people that, the clinic was growing, and I just thought, I can't have individuals that are not aligned with my viewpoint of how clients need to be taken care of working in my clinic. So that pivotal moment of deciding that I would rather have no care than the wrong care meant that I shut down my clinic and I sacked everyone. I didn't feel like I had another choice. I had to start again. And the angsty sort of experience that I was in of completely being gaslit and unsure of the direction to take meant that I had to shut down, because if I just put out some new ads for hiring in this state of complete confusion and overwhelm, there was a part of me that felt like I was in the wrong headspace to be re-interviewing and looking at people again, and I wanted a reset, right? What I didn't realize at the time was the power of energetics in hiring. I didn't know anything about energetics then like I know now, and I'm going to explain to you how I come to turn things around without even knowing the power of energetics. But in essence, I'd made some big shifts internally, which meant that was the first step to me actually starting to attract talent that were more aligned with my methodology of client care. Anyway, so the first big moment was shutting down the clinic and having a standard and not accepting that the way that I've been told things need to be is not the way that I want to operate. And I'd rather have nobody providing service delivery than a team of individuals providing a service delivery that wasn't up to the standard, right? Energetically, when I made that stance and I drew that line in the sand, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was putting myself into a much better position to start to call in people that were going to be much more aligned with that philosophy, right? Just by making that decision that I'm going to hold a standard, and this is going to be the mode of me starting to get back out there and look for the right people. When you're coming from that place, right? When you're coming from a place of empowerment, clarity, understanding what it is that you want and need from a talent, that's a whole different energetic exchange, right, in a hiring position. Complete. And like I said, I didn't know it at the time, but that's what had shifted internally for me. So that was, step one of your approach in being able to attract high quality talent in this industry is by drawing a line in the sand around your ideals and what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. Because I think that too often, you know, and I don't think I ever hired out of desperation. I think a lot of people do that right now. And I don't think I ever lowered myself to that position. But I was dictated to naively around level of qualification and experience. So, you know, what I come to realize was when I shifted internally and I went, these are the standards. And in fact, what I need to find is someone that is more aligned characteristically, not from a skill, not necessarily from a skill perspective, because we can always train skills, right? But in my opinion, you can't train values and what's important to people. And in essence, when I looked at that team, their version of client care was not my version of client care, and they were unwilling to see the difference. They didn't agree with me. My job isn't to change that, right? If they fundamentally don't agree that treatment planning and home care prescriptions are the way to get results, I'm not going to stuff around and convince somebody that that's the way to go, right? That's your belief. Great. Go and find a clinic that doesn't have those principles because that ain't my clinic, right? So when you start to get clear on what you stand for, from a values-based perspective, it's more important, in my opinion, that you look for people that are characteristically aligned with that over the skill sets. Because you can always train skill. You can't reshape personalities and values and ethics. They're either going to agree with your philosophies or they're not, right? I've seen too many business owners spend too long trying to convince people, right? That's different to people being underskilled and not knowing that treatment planning and home care prescriptions are the way to go. That's different. Being underskilled versus having a belief that that's not valuable or that's not useful to a client are completely different frameworks, right? So the stance of this is what I stand for and this is what you need to demonstrate to me completely changed the energetic transaction of who I was looking for. And as a result of that, it made me much more informed and put me in a better position to ask the right questions, to look into information that I was being provided in a recruitment process in a much more critical way, so that I was making the right decisions. So first and foremost, it's the energetic, draw the line in the sand. This is what I stand for. And I need to find talent that are aligned with that stance, first and foremost. The second step that, I come to realize that was incredibly important in weeding out people that may have not have been aligned, because you can have people that are saying all of the right things, right? But there does need to be a degree of discernment in information that you are coming across in a recruitment process. Now, what I mean by discernment is it's looking at information from a critical standpoint and working out what is the actual truth. Because often the information that we're being provided by a talent is a perspective. It's not necessarily the reality. And I think the added complication of recruitment is that people are supposedly, well, not even supposedly, they actually are trying to present themselves in the most favorable light, right? They're trying to sell themselves. So there does need to be high levels of critical discernment around the information that you're being provided, that you're not just taking things at face value, that you are actually investigating and performing due diligence on all the information that you're being provided so that you can make a good decision as to whether someone's going to be a good fit in your business or not. And I'm going to step you through kind of the methodology that I used to follow in, I suppose, allowing myself to, if you want to call it the due diligence process, or evaluating the information, looking through the information, seeking the evidence for the information, needs to be the approach, rather than just, like I did when I first started, reading a piece of paper and then assuming from what I was reading that that was a reality when it wasn't. So the first step that I used to undertake was something called a phone screen. I'd actually ring everybody that I suppose, well, in fact, maybe that's the second step. The first step was obviously evaluating the resumes. You don't want to get on the phone before you've actually had a good read and an understanding of a resume. Now, when I'm looking at, and again, you're looking at a document that contains a positive impression of someone's level of experience. It's not a reality, it's a perspective, right? And you have to get that clear in your mind. What you're reading on a resume is not a reality, it's a perspective. And you need to take that approach to the information that you're being provided via that resume. So in my terminology, in looking through the resume, and what I mean by that is not taking everything that I'm reading on the resume at face value, I would look for any, if you want to call them red flags or points or information that I'm looking at going, that might be an area of interest in terms of unpacking that a little bit more. So, you know, some examples would be around just where the therapist was located. You know, if they had an address that was 20, 30 kilometres away, naturally I think, does this person really want to travel a couple of hours to work in peak hour traffic every day? Right? So that might be me looking at information, right? There's an address on there. Now, sometimes we go, well, they've applied, so they must be willing to travel. Again, that's an assumption, right? So you need to go address more than 20 kilometres, 10 kilometres, whatever you feel like your threshold is, need to ask questions about that. You might be looking at some of the more obvious things that we know about in terms of gaps in employment or several employment or unsteady employment periods where you can see several employment positions in a short period of time. There might be things like lack of formal qualifications, that just anything that you're looking at that you read and you think, oh, that doesn't really make sense. Right. And then it could be as granular as spelling mistakes or, you know, a cover letter that's generic that has an old previously applied job role in it, you know, anything at all where you just think, you know, attention to detail, not great. Like you're looking through the resume for evidence of alignment, skill, attention to detail, care factor. You know, if you're going to have someone apply for a role and they haven't followed an instruction, let's say in the job ad, you say, I want you to send me a resume with a covering letter that tells me why you're interested in the role. And then you get 10 resumes with no covering letters. You know, these are people that haven't listened to instructions, right? So your desire to put up the antennas and look for the evidence, look for compliance, look for listening, look for taking on information, look for, because you're already appraising skills and approaches and personality from the application stage. You're already getting a sense of who people might be with what they, with from whether they've followed a process or not, right? So it's all data. Everything's data when you even just through an application process. So my approach to then jumping on the phone and having a conversation with people is about asking some clarification questions about anything that's come up in the resume for me that, like, because I don't want to waste an hour of my time in an interview with somebody if they're not, you know, if they live 20 kilometers away and they didn't realize. And I think the thing is that too often people will be quick to offer interviews. They get excited. They see a resume. Oh my gosh, 10 years experience. Can you come in and see me? Right. And then so many times I've seen my clients and even just people in the industry get so angry, and rightly so. Oh, this person didn't even show up for an interview. And it's like, I wonder how much of that could have been prevented if a due diligence process was followed before the interview stage. Because you can sniff people out before you come to the interview stage. And in fact, the interview stage should be where you're like, this person looks good, right? I've done my due diligence on the resume. I've asked any red flag clarification questions on the phone. Now I'm willing to invest some time, valuable time, in meeting this person face to face. It shouldn't be the go-to. You shouldn't automatically go to come in and see me as the first point of contact, because you will be really frustrated. And I've seen this when you get people that can't even be bothered to show up, or they're cancelling interviews 5 minutes before, or just all of that rubbish that makes you really frustrated when you've put the time aside in your diary and the person has been completely disrespectful and hasn't even bothered to show up, right? So you've done the resume review, the phone screen, you've ironed out any clarification points. And I just ask people directly on the phone, about those red flags. And there's also any other things that you might want to ask or clarify in the phone screen process, things like often things that come up in the interview that end up being a problem later on, as far as, whether they've got any pre-planned leave, you can get that out of the way in the phone screen. What their expectations around pay are, you can get that cleared up in the phone screen, because sometimes those things are not asked, and then it's a bit awkward and you go through a whole interview stage, and then I know I've been there before, you get to the end and it's like, okay, great. So your pay rate is, about that. Yeah, I'm not really. And it's like, oh no, I've just wasted all of this time on someone, and I was willing to pay them $30 an hour and they want 45. And geez, I wish I'd known that, because then I wouldn't have wasted all of the time going through that process if it was, beyond our budget in terms of recruitment, and there's nothing we can do about that. So anything that is going to knock someone out of the race really does need to be clarified on the phone, so that you don't waste your time in the interview process, right? So there's basically, before I get into the interview side of things, there's 4 characteristics that I feel like need to be explored when you come into an interview format. And these are characteristics of high performance. Okay. And I use these characteristics as the benchmark for or almost not, they are the context of a lot of the questions that I ask in the interview format. So what we know in terms of personality characteristics of people that tend to perform at higher levels in workplace environments is they demonstrate evidence of autonomy, self-directed learning, intrinsic motivation, and discipline. Those are the 4 talent characteristics of high performers. Now, I allow the characteristic traits and what I'm looking for to be the centerpiece of my interview, because my view is that any skill can be trained, right? But I can't enhance entrenched personality characteristics. Either people display these characteristics or they don't. And I'm only interested in having people in my business that display these high performance characteristics, right? So autonomy is the desire and the ability to work unsupervised, right? So when I come into an interview format, the questions that I ask are around behavioral demonstrations of that trait. So tell me about a time when. Could you give me a scenario where you have acted, or you want to get a sense from the team, from the prospective talent, that they've got evidence of this trait in some of the interactions or the situations that they've been in. You can't just ask somebody, do you like to work unsupervised? What do you think they're going to say? Oh, I love it. You're going to lead the interviewing process to the point where people are going to respond according to how they think you want them to respond. And that can be a fundamental flaw of interviewing technique, in that you basically tell people the answers in the way that you ask the questions, which then enables the other person to manufacture favorable responses. And you don't want that in an interview setting, right? You want as unfiltered and raw, genuine and authentic response as you can. And guess what? You inadvertently can influence that by the questions that you ask. So you need to be very careful. So when I'm asking questions about autonomy, I'm asking, tell me about a time when, you didn't have a lot of guidance on a work project, but you made it work and you got a good outcome, right? Not having a lot of guidance demonstrates the characteristic of autonomy, that they can just figure it out, right? Self-directed learning, right? This is the desire for team members to actually want to learn themselves. Like they actually have a drive to seek out information to be able to expand their skill sets and their expertise. And that's self-driven, So I would ask questions around, can you give me some examples of any professional or personal development that you undertake in your spare time? Examples of, not do you undertake your own self-development? Yes, I do. I'm going to answer that because I think that's what you want me to say. Whereas when you ask for examples of, you're pushing for the evidence, right, of self-directed learning. You're asking for an example, not just asking a leading question that influences them to just nod, right, and say yes. Intrinsic motivation, I think, is a tricky one, because I think that we have talent, or we have individuals in this industry that say the right things when it comes to whether they're passionate about what they do, but behaviorally that doesn't match up. So the definition of intrinsic motivation is actually an internal desire, a drive, a passion about what they do. They actually love it, right? They actually love being a hairdresser. They actually love being a skin therapist. It brings them joy, like they couldn't dream of doing anything else. Now, there is a big difference between that type of person and someone that, got sent to beauty school because they didn't want to do high school anymore and they hated going to school. So they just did a qualification to make mum and dad happy. And then they got spat out the other end of that. And then they decided to look for a job. And then they just applied for any old job. And then all they're doing is just cutting a paycheck. And unfortunately, in any industry, there is a group of people that love what they do, and there's a group of people that just simply cut a paycheck. They just roll out of bed every day, show up to work, do the bare minimum, and they go home, right? Now, my standard or my line in the sand is I don't want those people. I'm not interested in people that are going to cut a paycheck. But the job here is to work out in an interview format whether you have got somebody that is deeply passionate and driven around what they do versus somebody that's just cutting a paycheck. And the ability to discern that can be tricky, because you can have someone that talks a big game in terms of their passion, their drive, their commitment, how much they love the industry. But the only way that you're going to be able to measure that is through behavioral examples. And sometimes this is why probationary periods are really important. Sometimes you can't truly measure intrinsic motivation until you get them in the workplace environment and see what behaviors you start to witness. So for example, it could be behaviors such as showing up late for work, being disorganized, not doing the right, you might have a requirement for them to prepare for their day and get ready for clients and, read notes and whatever, and they're just not doing that. And it doesn't matter what you seem to say or do or train, or it doesn't seem to be cutting through. That might be the sign that you've got someone that's just cutting a paycheck versus, the person that comes in half an hour early, before shift, whether they're paid or not paid, they don't care, they're there anyway. They're listening to their iPod of the next, therapist or stylist that's, has great skills. They're doing all the preparation work that they've been trained to do. Like, they just do what they're supposed to because they can see the value in it and they love it, right? That's a demonstration of someone that's got really good intrinsic motivation. And it's almost like you look at those types of talent and you look at them and they're easy to manage because they just get it. What you're dealing with there is actually there's high levels of intrinsic motivation there, right? And as a result of that, they do what they're supposed to, and they do it without constant prompting and reminding because they want to, they're internally motivated to take care of their clients in a way that is driven by passion, not because they have to, which is a paycheck cutter, right? And then discipline is the final area of talent characteristic of a high performer that I look for, particularly in an interview process. But there can be evidence of discipline on resumes. So things like, discipline practices as far as their involvement in sports or their achievement of certain milestones in their life that would have required a lot of discipline. So for example, I had a candidate once that came in and she'd lost like 60 kilos, and I'm like, wow, what an achievement. Now, that takes a lot of discipline, right, to lose that amount of weight. So straight away, I'm thinking, right, I got a disciplined person in front of me, right? I definitely have that talent characteristic evidence of that sitting in front of me. A resume might be you're looking at talent that have been very successful in high discipline sports, for example, karate, black belts, stuff that actually takes grit to achieve. I look at something a bit silly. Part of my work experience in life was that I worked in a fast food restaurant, McDonald's, right? God, you got to be tough to work in there. You definitely have to be super disciplined because my view is if you can work in McDonald's, you could freaking work anywhere. And I feel like that's probably the same with the KFCs and all the other fast food type workplaces. So I used to look for discipline as a characteristic. And if I would see someone that was employed at McDonald's for any length of time, I know that I'm looking at someone that's probably quite disciplined and can take a lot, versus if I saw someone that, was employed by McDonald's and they lasted 2 months, that also told the story as well. So again, it's this, the interview process, looking at personality characteristic and asking behaviorally demonstrative questions to get them to prove or provide evidence for these traits or characteristics was the best way of me being able to discern whether the person in front of me is shit talking, or whether they've actually got proof that they're the right person to come in and be aligned with not just the ethics of my business, but also the personality characteristics of what's going to thrive in that environment. The next stage of this due diligence process then is, I suppose, the trade test, if you want to call it that. And for me, I took a different approach to this. Like, I really used it as an opportunity to see where they were at in terms of their skill level, but also to see what they were like in the live environment. When they come in, how did they engage with my existing team members that were often around? I actually would get my manager to perform the trade test, or a different person that wasn't involved. And sometimes my manager would be involved in the interview process, but I might get someone else that was skilled in the team to do the trade test. We were involving as many people and perspectives in the business that could provide a different insight on that individual as we possibly could, because having one perspective can be biased sometimes. So I think it's good to involve several perspectives in that process to get a more well-rounded viewpoint of a certain person that might be coming into your business. So the trade test allowed us to go, what level are they coming in at? But also that we understood that we were completely retraining people, regardless of their level of experience, because we had to train them around the way that we did things, which often was quite different to the formal trainings, qualifications, even those they were baselines, and we could see the baseline of expertise, I suppose, in the trade test. But it was just working out from what baseline are they coming from, right? Not we will train this and we won't train this. That person will go through all of the training, the same as anybody else in this business, but what level are they coming from? And then the final part of the due diligence process for me is the referee checks. And I've had a bit of a checkered history with referee checks, because there was a point in my career where I thought I'd kind of done a lot of referee checks for recruitment, and then for whatever reason, these people turned out to be nothing like the referee checks. And I almost decided that I'm not even going to do referee checks because people just talk crap. Obviously, there's business owners out there that unethically want to remove people from their business and don't tell the truth. And I got a little bit resentful about that. And I actually stopped doing referee checks for a period of time, because I thought, I'm not actually being told the truth regardless. I later come to sort of think, no, this is another source of information that if it's done in the right way, maybe I could work around some of the information that I'm being provided with the quality of the questions that I was asking. Right? That there was a way of me engaging the referee in a way that made it more likely they would give me an authentic and a genuine viewpoint of that person. And potentially it was the quality of the questions that I was actually asking that allowed someone to present a favorable perspective, as opposed to, me actually asking questions that could get around some of that and still get a better picture of what was the truth here, right? So I think that in referee checks, it can be definitely the quality of the questions that you're asking the referee, right? And the ability to find holes in the information that they're giving, or just asking them straight out, these are my concerns. What's your view on this? And that can catch referees off guard. Like sometimes a response of a referee can be what you're measuring against. So, for example, I had a referee once that said, I'd prefer not to answer that question. That's a response. Cool. So I know there's something amiss there, right? I've had a referee not wanting to provide a referee is a referee, right? Just the mere fact that they don't want to provide it, and they're shocked and confronted by the fact that you contacted them because the talent hasn't bothered to prep their referees, nor have they asked for permission, is a referee. It tells you something about the person, right? Even just requesting referees of the most recent employment position and having that met with a degree of opposition or resistance is a referee, right? From the response of the person that you're interviewing. So it's taking in the data, the responses, all of the information that you're receiving, whether it be verbal, whether it be written, whether it be behavioral, whether it be in response, whether it be in communication, all of that is data that you need to be appraising and looking at to see whether this is going to be the right fit, the right talent. And I can tell you that if you adopt this level of critical evaluation to your recruitment process, you are much less likely to end up with somebody that is not a good fit. But I think we've got a problem in this industry. I think, there's no doubt that we have suffered workforce shortages, skill shortages. COVID wiped us out in terms of, people leaving the industry or going into home salons and, but we can't allow that to dictate the standard of what we're willing to accept. And I feel like, the Debbies of the world, desperate Debbies, are hiring out of desperation, but then they're the first to complain about, there's no skilled people out there. And it's like, well, you didn't even check the referees, mate. Or you checked a referee and you ignored it. Or you didn't even, interview them properly. You went straight to, come in and do a day, and if it works out, then we're all good. Right? So the Debbies that are complaining that there's no skillful people out there, or there's not enough people that can do the job, aren't even exercising any form of critical evaluation or due diligence when it comes to the recruitment process. And then they're first to complain about it. It's like, get serious about the standard that you want to hold in your business. Stop friggin' hiring out of desperation. Right? Because your short-term gain of getting someone in to do the work and easing the pressure on you is going to be a long-term pain in the long run, right? Because they end up being the toxic people, the people that it's like pushing shit up a hill to get them to do what they're supposed to do in their job role. It's going to burn you in the end, right? If you're going to be a Debbie in the recruitment process and just hire out of desperation. And I understand the provocation to do that, but it takes courage to make a stance and go, this is the standard, right? I'd rather have no service than a substandard service, right? That takes courage. And you've got to be willing to do that to attract the right people into your business, right? You have to go first and make the stance, and then that will result in you being able to find and qualify better quality people to do the work. I'd love to know your thoughts. Guys, chuck your comments in the comment section. Always welcome. I'd love your feedback.